How you doing, guys? Back again with another video. So in this one I want to talk to you a little bit about neutral density filters, or as they're more commonly known, ND filters, when filming with your smartphone. So why, when and what is an ND filter? So essentially an ND filter is like a tint for your lens. So they come in various different shades, starting from light, and they work their way up to darker. And the reason you're going to be using a neutral density filter is the fact that when you're trying to film out in bright sunny conditions, for the most cinematic and smooth playback of your footage, you're going to want to be shooting at the 180-degree rule. So for anyone that doesn't know what the 180-degree rule is essentially whatever frame rate you are filming at, you want to have your shutter at double that. So if we're filming at 4K, 25 frames per second, I'm going to want to have my shutter at 1/50th of a second, which is double my frame rate. So the reason we do this is to get the sort of smoothest, the most cinematic looking footage when you play back. If you have your shutter too low, everything's going to be a little bit too dreamy and ooh. If you've got it too high, then everything's going to be a bit like this. It's going to be like a cartoony effect look. It's going to be really jittery and sharp looking. So you want to try and keep that as close as possible to double your frame rate. Now, with a smartphone, unlike other cameras that have lenses which have different apertures that you can change in order to cut the amount of light down, when you're using a smartphone, you've got a fixed aperture. So the iPhone XS Max, which I'm filming on now, has a fixed aperture of f1.8, and that's going to let a lot of light into the sensor. And the reason they do this is obviously for better low light performance, to be able to let a lot more light in to hit that small sensor. And so when we're outdoors and it's a bright sunny day, very, very bright conditions, in order to be able to achieve the 180-degree rule, we are going to need to use an ND filter, and we're going to need to put one on the end of our lens or fix one onto the end of your rig, or you can get clip-on ones that go over the end of it. And what we're essentially trying to do is cut the amount of light coming into the sensor so we can get the correct exposure on the image. Now, without this ND filter being on there, the image is going to be completely just blown out. It's going to be pure white on the screen, depending on how bright it is, but it is not going to look nice. And you don't really want to start messing about with your shutter too much in order to achieve the correct brightness. You want to try and keep that at double the frame rate, and then slap an ND filter on the end of your lens to get that correct exposure dialed in. So going back to ND filters and talking about those, you can get those in various different sizes, different tints. The ones that I prefer to use is called a variable ND filter. And essentially what this does is you can turn the end of the filter and it goes from light to dark. So essentially like buying 3 or 4 filters all built into one. And this means it's going to be a lot easier. You're not going to have so many filters laying about that you've got to try and keep clean and protect and keep in one place and take up more room in your bag. You've just got that one filter that you can screw on. And I'd always, if you're using something like I am now, I'm filming on the B-Script DOF Adapter Mark II with the Yongnuo 50mm f1.8 lens in the rig with my iPhone XS Max. Now, if I'm out in sunny conditions with this lens, this is the biggest lens that I currently have that I use on here. So I brought the biggest filter that I needed to fit this lens. Then every other lens that I then swap it out, or if I'm just using the ND filter on the end of the rig there, I can buy step down rings to step it down to the correct size, which just means I don't have to buy a whole load of different filters for different lenses. I can use that one filter, but then I'll just buy some little rings which don't take a lot of room up. They're very inexpensive, and you can just keep them somewhere in your bag, and then you can just step it down to the correct size that you need. And ND filters aren't actually really that expensive. Some of them, yes, obviously the better quality ones you can get that are 80, 100 pounds plus, but you can buy some really cheap ones on Amazon for say 10, 15, 20 pounds, variable ND filters. Really good quality. And then as you get better and you invest in, say, more expensive lenses, you can then buy and upgrade your ND filters essentially. And then as you get better filming, if you decide to purchase some more expensive lenses, if you're using the B-Script DOF adapter, then you might want to up your quality of your ND filter and buy a more expensive one to match that more expensive lens that you're putting on there, because at the end of the day, you're putting another piece of glass over the end of the glass of the lens that you already have. You really do want that to be as good a quality as you physically can. And I know it's expensive and it's only a filter, but this is one of the things that is going to make or break your footage. If you're looking at other people's footage they've shot on phones and it's outdoors in bright sunny conditions and you're trying to do the same thing and you're like, I cannot get this footage to look the same as them. How the hell did they do that? Mine just looks rubbish. Well, they've probably got an ND filter on the end of it to get that correct exposure, keep their shutter at double that frame rate, and that's why they're getting the most smoothest cinematic looking footage that's correctly exposed in those bright conditions. So when should we be using an ND filter? Well, essentially anywhere that there's so much light that you're trying to get your shutter speed to be double your frame rate, but the image is too overexposed. If that's happening anywhere that you are, then you need to be putting an ND filter over the end of it. And that's always going to depend on what phone, what make you've got, depending on the aperture of your phone, how much light that can take in. It's going to vary from phone to phone, from scenario to scenario. But essentially, if you're trying to film something, you're doubling your shutter speed to match your frame rate, and the image is too overexposed, even with the ISO as low as it physically will go, then you need to put an ND filter on the end of it. So if you're new to the channel and you haven't subscribed yet, consider subscribing. On this channel, I'm primarily making it about mobile cinematography and how to get really good, crispy, amazing cinematic footage just using your phone and accessories that you can buy for it. So if that's the type of thing you're into and you want to learn how to get really nice cinematic shots using your phone, then consider subscribing. I'd love you to come and join me on this journey that I'm going to be having this year. So I'd really appreciate if you come along on this journey this year with me, and we build like a nice little community where we can talk and learn from each other. So if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing. So essentially that is all an ND filter is. It's a tin that goes on the end of your lens, allowing you to be able to get the correct exposure when filming in bright sunny conditions. This is something that's really going to make or break your footage, and if you're not using one, I definitely recommend getting yourself one. I'll put a link to a few ND filters that are relatively cheap in the description below for you to check out. But yeah, once again, it's been an absolute pleasure. I've appreciated every minute of having you here. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe down below, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.